Hey everyone, today I thought we'd dive into the lore and gameplay and look at some mysteries or questions that have never really been answered, but may have crossed your mind at some point. I'm then going to briefly do my best to try and answer these. Let's get into it. Are the characters dead? Or just gone? This is a question I've always been pretty interested in. Whether the characters in game are technically dead, or as it's often referenced, have they just been taken from their universe? In the process of being taken into the realm, are the characters killed and resurrected in some form, or is it more of a process of the characters being reformed or repaired almost after each trial? In game there are multiple licensed characters who in their respective franchises were canonically killed, or dead, basically. For example, Bill, Tap, Pig, and Executioner, kind of. This isn't an issue unique to licensed characters though, as many original characters are moments before death, or potentially dead already as they're taken. Adam is in a train crash and is hit by a detached door, Jane is in a car accident, sliding off a road, and Elodie has been stabbed and is slowly bleeding out. Equally for killers, we have Spirit, who is cut to pieces and bleeding to death, Plague, who is on the brink of death from the plague, Oni, who is also bleeding to death in a stone mill, and Charlotte of the twins, who is freezing to death in the cold. Then we have Victor of the twins, who is literally completely dead before Charlotte is taken. This is a question I have, as I sometimes wonder what would happen if the survivors escaped, if the realm or the entity is the thing that saved them and keeps them alive, as it repairs the people who enter the realm. So upon returning, are they going to go back to their original state? It seems in the realm the characters no longer have physical bodies in the sense we understand, as they are constantly slashed, killed completely, and then reconstructed and brought back to life basically. Dead by Daylight's tagline is also, "Death is not an escape." This is referring more so to the trials and how you can die and then come back still in the realm. My opinion on this is that when characters are taken, their physical body is somewhat consumed by the entity and destroyed. From there I think it then reconstructs them in a certain way, removing injuries that may have occurred moments before their deaths, unless these injuries can be used to drive them, like in Spirit's case, acting as a reminder of their prior life. I think what remains of the characters is what could best be described as a soul, and so I think physically the characters are all dead in the realm, but their soul or their being is still the same one they had prior to being taken. Let me know what you think of this one. Next up, who are the pariahs? For this I mean literally who are they, as in who is their group. If you didn't know, the pariahs were a group of teenagers and children of another group named the Imperiati. The Imperiati supposedly were looking for the entity and its realm, using magical tools to try and locate and fight it. The pariah group is said to have had 5 members. 2 of these members we definitely know are in the group: Felix Richter and Elodie Rakoto. The other 3 members are uncertain, however the closest we've gotten to finding out a 3rd member is through the lore, where a character named Hattie Core has been mentioned quite frequently. Hattie does a similar thing in the lore to Elodie, but on a slightly larger scale, searching for the Black Veil and attempting to expose them. The Black Veil are an evil cult who worship the entity. The Black Veil are also the same group that caught Charlotte and Victor and experimented on them. Hattie seems to have powers of some kind and is seemingly psychic. Much like Felix and Elodie, Hattie's parents disappeared whilst on vacation, and possibly on an island when she was young. The event where Felix and Elodie's parents were taken was on vacation, and on an island named Dire Island, where the Imperiati would meet. The importance of the pariahs, I would argue, is that they're, first off, the most knowledgeable characters we know of in regard to the entity. Second, as a result, they're likely the best shot anyone in the realm has to get out, or to be saved. More on the pariahs could reveal 2 of the biggest mysteries of what is the entity and what is the realm. My counter-argument for Hattie being a pariah is that when her parents disappeared, she was 5, whereas both Felix and Elodie are teenagers, and further, the pariahs are. They're said to be a teenage group. With that said, I do think Hattie is probably a member. If not, she may have still been another child of the Imperiati, just slightly younger and not part of the pariahs. It could always be a crazy multiverse thing too, and she's a pariah just in a different universe. I think the outlining of her parents disappearing on vacation is too much of a coincidence and had to be intentional, especially given her powers and her similar goal of seeking out the entity. In terms of who the other 2 are, I have no idea honestly. Moving on, who exactly is Benedict Baker? This is a question I think most people have, even if you've only glanced at the lore a couple times. You'll see the name Benedict Baker appear quite often. What we don't know though is who Benedict Baker actually is, aside him seemingly knowing a substantial amount about the realm realm and those inside of it. To link back to the Pariahs and the Imperiati briefly, it seems possible to me that Benedict had some link to them. In his journal he documents his attempts to find the Entities realm, investigating the town of Weeks where there's been many mysterious disappearances. The town of Weeks is the same town that the Trapper was situated in, and where the Macmillan estate was in the real world. Whilst he's there, he then goes to investigate the Macmillan estate and he supposedly gets taken. It doesn't directly say that, but it's pretty heavily suggested. Upon entering the realm, he is quite confused, and his first question, linking back to my first question here, is, am I alive? From here on, he remains at the campfire and takes part in the trials. He then mentions the trials, survivors, killers, and even sitting by the campfire in his journal entries. However, despite all this, we never see him. He eventually gives up his journal after 49 entries, stating, "What is to become of me? Have the killers started out at this campfire too? I bid this journal adieu. I must focus on staying alive." And so, to the best of our knowledge, Benedict is alive. The question is, where is he? My go-to answer for who is Benedict is quite simple. I personally think he's just an early version of the Observer. Once the Observer began appearing in the game, Benedict kinda fell away and didn't appear anymore, not even to comment on the new killers arriving. And to be honest, prior to the release of Tomes, the lore was always very much in the back seat, and so it kinda makes sense to essentially rework Benedict. Benedict and the Observer share many similarities. They both desire knowledge and an escape. They both have journals or entries of some kind in the lore, and they both have prior knowledge of the entity before their arrival to the realm. So yeah, I just think Benedict was like a beta version of the Observer before there were plans to really expand on the tomes and the lore itself. Hey, maybe the Observer is actually called Benedict though, and they kinda merge the characters instead of just replacing them. Why don't the survivors fight back? This is a question you've almost definitely thought at one point or another whilst playing the game. You climb into a locker, but why doesn't my survivor simply grab a hatchet or two, or a couple of those throwing knives? My answer to this is that I believe the survivors have been rewired, as it were, by the entity, and have been made incapable of touching or wielding these weapons. Maybe it's even like a Mjolnir situation, like with Thor, where there's magic that makes most people incapable of wielding the weapon. When we think about it as well, it's not like the survivors don't have anything to fight back with. Nowadays we have pallets, flashlights, head-on, decisive strike, blast mines, and flashbangs, the last two being like actual weapons. I think the difference between the two though is that these are all much more passive than the others. What adds to this confusion however is moments in trailers, for example. In the Resident Evil trailer, Jill is shown to wield a gun that fires bullets. We know this is taking place in the Realm 2 because of the pallet for a start, but also because all four of these RE characters are together in the RPD. Canonically, Chris is in Europe, and Jill, Leon, and Claire all have misaligned stories whilst in Raccoon City, with the only direct overlap being Claire and Leon. Oh yeah, and also Meg's there. Now of course the argument for this is that, well, the trailers aren't canon. They're just a thing to show off the content. What happens in them isn't necessarily happening canonically in Dead by Daylight, which, yeah, I'd agree with. However, I think it's one of those things that does still add to the confusion. Equally to characters not wielding weapons, there's also the mystery of some of the characters being incredibly powerful in their own right, but not fighting back. Cheryl, Ash, Chris, Jill, Leon, Claire, and Bill, just to name a few, are all stronger than many of the killers, especially the more physically human ones like Legion or Trickster. So my best answer to survivors fighting back in some form is that basically they can't. Either they are punished too severely for attempting to fight back, or they have been rewired to some capacity, and so it doesn't even occur to them whilst in a trial. Maybe there's even some things or actions they literally physically cannot do whilst in the trials, like climbing, sitting, or speaking, for example. At the campfire, they seem to have far more autonomy over their bodies, having different poses, warming their hands, sitting down, potentially even speaking like in Ash's case. I think a lot like how the entity restricts the playable area, it restricts the survivors also, and so the lack of talking or fighting back is simply a canon thing. It's not a gameplay mechanic, it's just literally how the trials happen. When in the trials, the survivors simply cannot do these things, because the entity restricts them in some form. realm. That's my personal take at least. Finally, who or what is the entity? This is a question that will likely always be a mystery. I really don't see this one ever getting truly solved, because this question essentially drives Dead by Daylight. The mystery of what the entity is, what it wants, what it's doing is kind of key, I feel, to Dead by Daylight's whole feel. I don't think this is a question that will be answered. From what we currently understand, the entity is a highly powerful ancient being that can reach into all corners of the multiverse, snatching people up and using them to farm emotion with its trials. It manifests physically as spider-like claws, and also its fog. In its own realm, it is seemingly capable of creating anything it wishes, having near complete control over other highly powerful characters. Its motivation, to the best of our knowledge, is to survive, and to continue feeding from the trials and the emotions they create. Its goals, I would argue, appear malicious, with all those that interact with it suffering in some way. I personally think that the entity isn't meant to be particularly nuanced. It's meant to simply represent this unstoppable evil force that can snatch people from wherever it pleases. A fog you cannot hide from. I think it's really that simple, and the entity is simply what it appears to be. I think it's just one of those cases where there's not much to it, despite its seeming complexity. It's just so big and so ancient, and its actions seem inherently evil from our human perspective, when more than likely this is just how the entity lives or exists, and has done for many years. Right, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and be sure to drop your own thoughts or answers to these mysteries down below. Thanks, and goodbye.